to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call. Mr. Schiff.
Here.
Mr. Franco.
I'm here.
Mr. Cabrera.
I am here. In compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231, Public Law 1975, the notice requirements have been satisfied as to the time, place, and date of holding said meeting by posting notice here in the bulletin board in Borough Hall and by mailing and emailing same to the Herald of Cape May County on October 4th, 2023, and the Crest of Atlantic City on December 13th, 2023. In the event of an emergency, your emergency exit is the back door, the way you came in, our front left, your back right, or our front right, your front left, just by the American flag. Just a couple quick reminders. This evening, this meeting is being shown live on the borough's Facebook page and also the borough's YouTube channel. We'll do a quick sound check. Nikki, test 1, 2, 3. Are we good to go? All right, we are live. Okay. If you're watching this meeting live and you have a public comment, you're more than welcome to call into the conference line that sits up here on the dais. You're going to dial the phone number 888-363-4734. And when prompted, you're going to enter the access code 9699020, followed by the pound or the hashtag. In the event you watch the recorded version of this meeting, you're more than welcome to email our clerk at clerk@wildwoodcrest.org with any questions or comments you'd like to make, or you may phone her at 609-729-8040. This meeting, we expected a nice turnout for this meeting tonight for tonight's bayfront improvements for the bulkheads and the valves and the street raising project. That was actually on their agenda under number 13. We're going to move that earlier here this evening. So those of you who want to hear this and participate in that presentation, then after that you're more than welcome to leave, or you can certainly stay for all the fun that happens after our normal, as we conduct our normal business meeting. Okay, that said, I'd like to introduce Mark de Blasio and Matt Abrams from Mark de Blasio and Associates, our engineers. They're going to do the presentation of that project on the west side. Go ahead, Mark.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. So we're excited to present the borough's Bayside Bulkhead Replacement Flood Mitigation Improvement Project. This project has been several years in the making, and we look forward to the benefits that the project's going to provide to the property owners and the public accessing this area. We're going to spend a minute recapping why this project was developed. Back in 2019, the borough adopted a flood mitigation and storm sewer master plan, which had several purposes. First one was educating the borough, public, and private property owners of the existing flooding challenges facing the borough. Establishing recommendations to mitigate adverse impacts of flooding and other coastal hazards that affect the borough. Providing flood mitigation infrastructure options to guide the borough when considering capital improvements. Complying with the federal emergency FEMA CRS program with the potential of enhancing the status and improving your position. Participate and coordinate flood mitigation efforts with federal, state, county, and local entities. So this project that we're going to present is a direct result of the one bullet point of providing flood mitigation infrastructure options. So the recommendations contained in that plan are going to be effectuated in this project. There are 3 recommendations that were in the master plan that are incorporated into this project. These are general objectives here. The first one is we're going to be elevating the borough bulkheads to elevation 8 in the 88 datum. Specifically, the street ends that border the bayfront are going to be raised to that elevation. The second one was elevating roadways, and in this case, this is just the street ends that abut the bulkhead and then tie back into Park Boulevard or Lake Road. And install a more reliable bayside tide control option. There were 4 options presented to the borough as a result of the master plan. During the deliberation, the borough eliminated the traditional option, which is the tide flex valve that's installed on the other side of the bulkhead on the pipe that's proven to not be effective. The second option that was eliminated was the SCADA operated control valves, because those valves require power, electrical boxes being elevated, so there's an aesthetic issue that's associated with that. So the borough opted to, as part of this project, install manually operated control valves, as well as we designed the project to accommodate potential storm sewer pump station installations in the near future, and we'll talk about that at the end. This map represents the total project location. So the project spans from Primrose Road to Cressy. The areas that are circled in red are what we would call the getting the full works, or the full Monty. Those areas go from Primrose Road to Cardinal Road, and they include the replacement of the existing bulkhead, new storm drainage improvements, the installation of that more reliable tide valve, and street end raisings on the block. The yellow X's represent roads that are just getting valves installed, and we'll talk about that in a second, why that's just occurring there in those sections. These next two slides show what we consider to be nuisance flooding, which we're trying to eliminate or mitigate. So this is a slide that shows you on a normal, happy, sunny day, everyone's going about their business, everything's dry. And then we have the twilight zone effect, which is it's still sunny, it's not raining, and we have flooding going on the roadway. And as you can see too, that bayside tide level isn't higher than the bulkhead, so you're wondering what's actually happening here. You're actually experiencing what's known as Pascal's principle, which liquid pressure is uniformly transmitted throughout the entirety of the liquid system. In more familiar terms, as water seeks its own level, and that water in the roadway is at the same level as the bayfront. As previously mentioned, this project has three general improvements. The first one is to install a more reliable tide flex valve, or tide control valve. Utilizing that same slide that we just showed you, when that valve is installed and is properly operated and maintained, it will prevent the water from coming back up in the street. So in this instance here, we actually assigned some
That was the TV.
okay.
You're okay.
We actually assigned what we think is a real-life scenario here to the borough. A street elevation of elevation 2.7, a bulkhead elevation of 4.5, which is relatively low. We have a tide elevation of 4. If that valve is in place, that water cannot creep back up into the roadway, and actually has to work harder to flood the borough, which would be elevation 4.5, which is the lowest bulkhead. So the borough is afforded protection from elevation.
Bill, you just turn this one off, Don.
Oh, jeez, sorry.
Turn it back on.
That's probably why that HDMI cable is
Oh,
disconnected.
wow, it came back on now.
You gotta power this one up over here on the right.
That's the one that shorted out.
That could be why it was unplugged.
What do you mean, blew up?
Matt, do you have another copy of that presentation? You're good. You're good. Do you need?
Okay. All right. So this slide represents a real-life scenario in the borough where you have pavement elevation of 2.7, a bulkhead elevation of 4.5, and with a properly operating valve, the roadway and flooding will be protected until the water breaches the bulkhead, which in this case would be 4.5. Under a normal scenario, you would have water in the roadway, which would be at the same elevation as the bay, which in this case would be elevation 4, so you would have over a foot of standing water in the roadway. These manually operated valves, the picture on the left-hand side is a typical representation of where this would be installed and what it would look like. These valves are manually operated. The borough will be required to actually go there, open and close these manually. There's going to be a science and a policy to that, when to open, when to close them, who's tracking the tide, etc. These valves, I believe there's going to be 15 to 18 valves. Some of these valves are very large. They're 24 inches in diameter. It takes numerous turns to close them. So we're recommending that the borough purchase the necessary equipment, automated equipment that can be attached to trucks to go and actually close these valves. The second improvement that we mentioned in the project is the replacement of the existing bulkheads. This video shows an actual representation of Wisteria Road on a high tide event. That bulkhead is at elevation 4.92. Under the proposal, the borough will be replacing that bulkhead to elevation 8. And just to give you some graphical context, elevation 8 is going to be at the top of that rail.
How tall is that?
Top of that rail.
I'm saying how tall is elevation?
At the top of that rail.
Yeah.
I'm saying how many feet?
It's 8 feet relative to the 0 of the 1988 datum. It's a technical answer.
You'll see a graphic in this. I'll show you in a minute.
Here's another example of the bulkhead replacement. We have a before photo of Columbine Road on the left-hand side, elevation 5.15, which is approximately 3 feet lower than where the borough's bulkhead ordinance is required. When that bulkhead is replaced, we're trying to make it very graphically clear that that bulkhead will be up at that elevation of the handrail. So you will not be able to see directly through to the water at that point. You'll have to walk up to the bulkhead and peek over it.
Is that consistent with the bulkheads
We'll-
on, say?
We'll answer questions at the end.
Okay.
We'll get through this. The third and final piece of this is roadway raising. Let me back this up here. So here's that example of a bulkhead at elevation 5.15. So that bulkhead is going to go up approximately 3 feet. We tried to compensate for that. Once that bulkhead goes up to 8, we're trying to raise the street ends on the back side of the bulkhead. Based on the designs we've completed, that raising of the roadway is going to come up anywhere from 6 inches to 15 inches and then taper down to 0 at Park Boulevard. This will provide like an immediate benefit to property owners on the corner that have driveways on the side roads. Not that we're going to eliminate flooding, but we're going to make that access a lot easier. And what this also does is it provides the borough the opportunity to get some waterproofing behind that bulkhead up to the top of the pavement surface. As I had mentioned earlier, there's a section of roadways that were those yellow X's from Astor to Cressy Avenue. At this point, those roadways were improved through 2010 to 14. The bulkheads were upgraded, roadways were repaved, and are in generally pretty good shape. So as part of our project, we're going to be installing a valve only to provide better protection for tidal inundation. And at some point in the future, the borough is going to look to raise those bulkheads. Those bulkheads are at, generally speaking, elevation 6, which conform with the old ordinance. So they're in pretty good shape. They just need to receive a cap. So our total project estimated construction cost is about $6 million. The proposed schedule has us going out to bid this summer, with construction starting in the fall of this year and completing in the summer of 2025. We're going to have to work with the contractor and manufacturer on the valving because those are special lead items, so that may affect the scheduling, but the physical construction and the roadway improvements, et cetera, will be completed in time for summer 25. In regards to grants, the borough has been aggressive over the last couple of years, unsuccessful, but hopefully we're going to be Abraham Lincoln here and finally hit it. The borough has applied for FEMA grants at the end of last year for 2 pump stations located strategically through the triangle area of the project. We have an estimated construction cost of $12 million for that project. If the borough is successful, the borough will receive a 75% grant on that with a 25% match. Additionally, the borough has successfully worked with Congressman Van Drew's office to establish an earmark for the borough in the tune of $4.1 million grant to offset the pump station project, whether it's 1 or 2, but that money hopefully will be available to the borough. And like I mentioned before, this project will be designed in a manner to integrate or accept 2 pump stations in the future if they so happen. So that is our presentation. Where do we go from here? We refine the drawings, we go out to bid, and then once the borough's completed these improvements, our weakest link in the flood wall, so to speak, will be private properties, which at that point, private property owners will need to do their part to raise their bulkheads.
So.
Mayor, that's,
So outside of private properties, you have the whole Lake Road. You have the whole Sunset Lake area.
right.
Is there a strategy to make that compliant as well?
So Sunset Lake generally is, receives elevations of between 6 and 7. So that's pretty good. That's a really good height. If the borough wants to consider raising that to 8, they could do that with land berming, but that's not part of this project. To put that all in perspective, the borough has seen 2 elevations over 6 in the last 20 years. That was Hurricane Sandy and Jonas. So those elevations on that bayfront are close to that. So the borough's in pretty good shape. If the borough's entire bayfront was at that elevation, we would be in really good shape.
We've had our house since 1977 on the corner of Crocus and Park. We've had one instance of greater than that was Hurricane Sandy. Since 1977, so. Is there any supplemental funding for homeowners to be compliant? You gotta shut that valve off.
I would just unplug.
Is there
On the
anything
side.
funding for
Oh, there's
homeowners
just
to
that
be
one.
compliant?
There's a
That I'm
button
not
on the
aware of. You
It's on
might
this
want to
side.
reach out to FEMA. There might be some, I know
Top
there's
thing. Is
funds
there a
from
button there?
FEMA to raise homes.
All
So it depends on what, are you talking about new bulkhead or raising your home?
Oh, just to be compliant, we would have to raise our bulkheads.
Yeah.
We're not talking about raising our homes, right? So if everyone has to be compliant with the borough on the street ends, we gotta raise our bulkhead to meet your size, correct?
Let me just interject. So just so everyone knows, the ordinance that we passed, there's no compliance date. So right now, if you,
Say that again.
there's no timeframe as to when private property owners have to raise their bulkheads. There's nothing there. There is, if I recall, Solicitor Galzunas, if you do substantial improvements, roughly 50% of the value of property, then you would have to raise your bulkhead. Otherwise, there's no requirement at this time for any private property owner to raise their bulkheads to match the borough's 8 feet.
So I'm in the category, so, for what it's worth.
You're in the category of making.
Substantial
homes-
improvements.
Okay, yeah.
I think my builder's gonna talk to you.
Okay, so what would happen in that case, just for everyone's information, if you're in that situation and your bulkhead needs to be raised or replaced, we would encourage you to engage a licensed engineer, because your bulkhead may be in good shape, it could be retrofitted to be extended, not just replaced
We've
wholesale.
addressed both options, Jeff.
Okay.
At the end of the day, we're still gonna have a wall between myself and the water.
Before we go any further, if anyone has public comments, I'd just like to give your name so our clerk can record it for the record. So just we have Tommy Alvarado and
I got him.
God.
Yep.
Get, I interrupt you, I'm sorry.
No, no, it's okay.
I have a question.
Name, please.
Being a person that is.
I need your name.
across-
I need your name for the record.
Colleen Brady.
Thank you.
Being a family that's lived since 1940 down here, across the street at Park Boulevard and between Lotus and Palm. And our back porch looks directly over, like, we can see the view of the lake from that back porch. How high are we talking about bringing these pillars up that, like, so that we won't even have a view of the beach at the water anymore because of how high you're gonna build these?
So I can't answer that question because I don't know how high your deck is, but that representation is pretty much at scale.
So you're talking 8 feet.
The wall would be like 3 feet high.
Yeah.
No,
No.
not 8 feet from the top of the road surface. If you look at that photo on the left, ma'am, you see that top rail
Yeah,
of okay? That's gonna be the top of the new bulkhead.
okay, because I took a ride down Lake Road and to Astor, and there's not one thing on Lake Road over 26 inches. And that's even including the curb. And yet, when you get to Astor, it's 31 inches. So, like, from the asphalt and up. So I'm asking, like, are we looking, as we go further down, higher and higher from the asphalt?
So, in that scenario right there, like in that photo, okay, that's what the borough deals with now.
Well,
So,
that's an anomaly. That's not a thing that goes on all the time.
So the
I've been
top,
here
of-
long enough to tell you that that does not happen all the time.
so the tops of those bulkheads will be at the same elevation, at elevation 8, and our pavement elevations are gonna be raised, so we're gonna compensate for that a little bit. But if you're standing in the intersection of Park Boulevard and you're looking at this bulkhead, and you can see the water today from where you're standing, you're not gonna see it when you're standing there at the end of the project.
Right, so.
But if you're up on the deck across the
So
street,
anybody that doesn't live on the water now doesn't have to do. That's
I
pretty much
got
what
it.
you're doing.
I don't know if that's the case, because I don't know where you're located and how high your deck is elevated across the street.
Because what, okay, it's lower on one end of like Lake Drive and there, and then you're elevating it all the way down to the lake itself at Rambler Road, then it's like, okay, well, anybody down there has no lake view anymore.
If
You can live on the street, but you can't see the lake.
Yeah, I want to be clear, so just so you know, the current bulkhead that you're talking about, there's like 3 layers of bulkhead there now. Those bulkheads are failing. So the federal government, FEMA, says, hey, you gotta rate, the standard is 8 feet ADD.
NAD.
So it's, when you say the borough, so we're just trying to get the borough caught up on aging infrastructure to help reduce the flooding that's going on, but also give you a better product that's gonna last a long time. And when you do that, you need to get to the FEMA's recommendation.
I understand that, but I'm just saying the lake isn't the water is coming from the pipes. It's not coming from the lake coming over.
Oh,
The
it
bulkhead.
is, it actually is in some areas, yes, it is. It absolutely is. I saw it, it's coming through, and it's coming through the bulkhead in some cases.
It
But-
comes through the bulkheads, but
but-
not like
but-
that.
but-
It's once in a while like
No, I
that.
think, no, well, but if it's coming through, because they need to be watertight, so the water's gonna come through, and it's gonna not only go through the valve back, but it's also gonna be additional water coming
Oh, I
back.
understand, but that's an anomaly. That's not the everyday case down here. That's
Okay,
not- that's not
forget that
true.
picture for a second,
That's
the
not
bulkheads
true.
still need to be replaced, that's my point.
So that bulkhead right there is actually almost 2 feet shorter than the requirement prior to the adoption of the 8. So that's a low bulkhead.
But yet you put the same size bulkhead on Lake Drive. Last year and the year before, all Lake Drive was done, and there's not one higher than that.
I don't think we did any bulkhead projects last
There's
year.
not one higher than that. I went and measured at every end of every street.
I think
There's not
that-
one
that was-
higher
That's
than
about 10 years ago, I think, you're talking about. You're talking about the concrete bulkheads?
I'm talking about the concrete
Yeah,
bulkhead.
that wasn't done last year.
It was done, what, 2 years ago?
No,
Yeah, maybe a couple
8 to
more.
10 years ago.
yeah, so I didn't.
But not one of them is more than 21 to 26 inches.
They're not high enough, under the new code, they're not high enough. They're gonna be raised by
They're gonna be raised
18 to 20 inches.
Are they gonna be raised too?
Not part of this project, no.
But
At some
they,
point in time, they're gonna need to be.
They will be.
They very well be, yes.
Yeah, they're at 6, right?
You're right, I think they're right, 6
Six.
feet right now.
6 to 7.
6'2".
6 to 7.
Go ahead.
Gary Agnes, AGNESS. There's a group of us that live at the Cressy side of this whole project. Is it true that Cressy Avenue is the second lowest elevation in the entire Wildwoods?
From my recollection, the intersection of Cressy Avenue in the
Lake Road?
borough, yes, in Lake Road, in the borough of Wildwood Crest, I believe, is the lowest elevation.
West Wildwood is the lowest on the island, and that happens to be the second lowest to the best of my knowledge.
So the answer to your question is, the intersection that you're speaking of, at least in Wildwood Crest, I can't speak to other communities, I believe from my recollection, that's the lowest spot
What we
in
are
the borough of Wildwood
facing,
Crest.
and we're not talking about new or full moon, nor'easter and high tide combination, which is the worst scenario we're gonna get. General tides back up through the existing outflow pipes into the street, probably tenfold the amount of time that you would ever see anything there. It's a common occurrence, period. The money that was spent, 8, 10 years ago when they did that project, was pissed away. That's all it was, because they raised the road ends, the street ends 9 inches then, from what they were prior to that. They changed the location where the drains are from at the bulkhead to Lake Road. They're bringing everything down. I still contend that if we do not have some kind of dredging involved in all this project, I don't care what you do, it's not gonna make a difference. Because water from the land that goes to the bay is not only pushing water out there, it's pushing sand out. And that's coming up and up and up more and more. If you look at the channel along Lake Road all the way through, you probably have 15 less feet from the marshes in where the muck is taken over. And the same thing with people who have water, you know, the waterfront property themselves. In low tide right now, people who have floating docks are in the mud. So somewhere along the line, I know it's expensive and I know they got all kinds of crap, it's because of money, but if we do not take that base and get that down, a bulkhead is designed to keep the land in. A bulkhead is not designed to keep the water out. Yeah.
So, two comments to your comments, sir. One is, the first one is you're correct. So the flooding that you experience at that intersection is primarily tidal that comes out of the roadways.
And back up.
So to give you,
Not only that intersection, but all the way up to Buttercup, you know.
so to give you some context, I believe that the elevations in an intersection are about 2.5. They're definitely less than 3. So when we looked at 20 years worth of tide gauge data, elevations in that area above 3 were 57 times a year. So you probably have anywhere from 50 to 60 times the flooding on average over a 20-year period in that intersection. So you're right, and I suspect that flooding is occurring primarily in the beginning out of the roadway and then probably over some lower bulkheads. The second part is of your comments about the dredging would be true if you, I don't want to get super technical here, if you were in a free flow condition, if that water was flowing through the pipes out into an open atmosphere, that would be true. But we actually have this scenario here where we're in a closed system. So if you notice, it wouldn't matter how much you dug on the waterward side, the tide is going to find its own level no matter what.
Yes,
So
but it's got a lower base, so therefore,
But
the
it-
same amount of water is only it's gonna bring that higher end of it down too.
if you were to dig out the entire world, right? So if you were to go and dredge right in front of that bulkhead, that water level will never change.
I don't mean just in front of the bulkhead, I mean that,
You'd have to dredge out to the Atlantic Ocean. So just to give you everyone's expectations, the valve is going to play the most crucial piece in helping you with nuisance flooding to a certain point, because we still have private bulkheads in your area that are like 4.2.
yeah, I know, we got
Okay.
one that's not worth a tinker's damn because he won't do anything with it.
So there's so your lowest bulkheads are 4.2. We have a 4.3 and a 4.6. So this project is going to help you guys to a certain extent. So my general statement to everybody is, if anybody asks the question, how much flooding is going to be reduced when the borough finishes this job? My answer is going to be, generally speaking, it's going to help protect you for 6 more inches throughout that whole area. You realize more success as people raise their bulkhead. So if that lowest bulkhead at 4.2 becomes 4.6 or 5, you gain more protection. So the borough's going to complete all of this work, and then hopefully the private property owners will step in and help out as
I
well.
mean, I don't wanna see private property owners get it on the chin, but bottom line is, if you got a bulkhead here from the town, and you got everybody else's here, you haven't done anything, period.
If it's not connected.
Right, so-
I mean, right now you got bulkheads that aren't even connected. You street end bulkheads, because you cannot, according to what we were told, you cannot tie into private property bulkheads unless there's some agreement there. There's spaces that wide from private property to street end basin. The water's gonna come through that. It's gonna happen. You know, just like you said, it finds its own level. It's gonna come through there unless, and I don't wanna see a lot of people have to spend a lot of money. That's not my point. But unless that does happen across the board, all the way up and down, it's not gonna change
So
that. It's
to-
only gonna change the width of the street.
So,
That's the
so
only
we're
thing
trying to
that's gonna
manage
change.
everyone's expectations that this project could be a $50 billion project and you're gonna have the same result until such time as those bulkheads come up and your streets can get raised as well. It's not, ma'am.
Hi, Nancy Agnes, I just have a question. You said these are gonna be, maintained by Public Works?
The valves.
What
will-
about on like Sunday morning, 2 o'clock, we got a flood tide coming, will the valves be taken care of?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
So what'll end up happening, this'll, if you don't mind me speaking for the borough, so this'll be new territory for the borough. So the borough's gonna have to adopt a policy on how to maintain these valves. Their policy could be, and again, I don't wanna speak for Public Works, their policy could be, we'll keep all the valves shut and we'll only open the valves when it rains and the tide's down. They can leave the valves open, they can close them based on predicted tide charts.
Okay,
So there's gonna be a science to it.
okay.
But my recommendation to the borough would be to do it in an efficient manner so you don't have to touch them every other day.
Mhm, okay.
Sir? Yeah, my name's Jim Jones. Two questions. First of all, you're gonna put these manual valves on the street ends?
Correct.
Where on the street ends, and will it affect parking on the street ends?
No, so these valves will be no different than what you see in the roadway for water main valves. They will be buried.
Okay, but they still have to get access to them, right?
They're going to pop, so if you look at a typical water main valve in the street, there is a cast iron box that comes out with a lid. They would pop the lid, they would use their equipment, they would get on the nut of that valve, turn it closed, put the lid back on and move to the next one.
Okay, and where in the street are they gonna be located? You won't be able to park a car over top of these?
I believe they're located in various spots in the street end. Are they in any parking areas?
So you're not
For the
gonna be
most
able
part,
to
they're
park a
right next.
vehicle over the valve?
Well, I don't think, is there parking on the street ends anyway?
Yeah,
Are they-
on
yeah.
both sides, but you may have to, like, if you, depending on where they have to go. you may
Most
have to
of them are
restrict
wherever
parking where that valve is.
Most of them are
They'd be
oriented
at
where
the
the
corners.
pipes are coming through the bulkhead, which most of them are on
The
the
corners.
sides or the
Yeah.
corners.
And I think you can
Okay.
park
And a
within
number of
20
them have
feet.
2 pipes.
Some,
Outflow pipes are 2. And based on that, then yes, it would affect parking, because they are close enough to the curbs right now, where people can park there. The only place you cannot park at street end is in the center of the street.
some of those double pipes will be converted to one, so there'll be one valve.
Yeah, I think it's something that needs to be looked at, because if you take a look at Primrose, for example, the street end there, on the left-hand side, you have pull-in parking off the street. And on the right-hand side, you have vehicle parking, parallel parking parallel parking on the street. So you have to figure out how you're gonna maintain
What's that?
access to the covers.
So that's something we can look at.
Okay.
That's a good comment.
Second question. I live at 7010 Park Boulevard, right across from the water tower. Park Boulevard always floods there, on the high tides. Do you anticipate that when this project's completed, that will flood in
No.
that location?
I'm gonna be very clear about that. You're gonna benefit average about 6 inches of less flooding than what you experience today, until such time that everybody else's bulkhead gets raised.
Okay, well, yeah, but it doesn't come up with the bulkhead in that area. Everything comes up the drains.
Right, that's correct. So you will not experience the normal flooding coming out of the drains until such time that that water level on the bay finds a spot, whether it's a gap in the bulkhead, whether it's over property owner X's bulkhead or a hole in the bulkhead.
Okay, well,
So you're gonna get a level of protection to a certain extent.
Okay, because Primrose to Myrtle, nothing comes over the bulkheads. It all comes up the drains. And that's where it was.
Okay?
One more question. The valves, they're cast iron valves?
Cast iron valves with as much stainless steel that we can get involved with them, yes.
Because what would be the longevity of a valve sitting underwater?
So the valves will be no different than a water main valve that sits in a road for 50, 60 years. So we work with the manufacturer to make sure that as much of the guts are stainless steel as possible. It would be no different than a valve that's buried out in these roadways now. Right.
American stainless steel or Chinese?
Well, everything has to be,
Hopefully American.
Has to be American.
yeah, but New Jersey law requires everything to be American-made.
Go,
How
Joanne.
often do you work those valves that are installed in the street
I need your
now?
name, sir.
Oh, Polware, W-A-R-E. So you said this will be as good as the other valves, or how often do those valves get at the water valves?
Well, the borough doesn't own or operate the water main system, so I don't know the answer to that.
Nobody, so once they turn the water on in somebody's house, maybe they never.
Those valves are always open or you wouldn't have water.
Right,
So
right, right.
I can't speak for the Wildwood Water Utility when they exercise them,
Yeah.
but I'm gonna venture to guess that once this project's completed, the borough's gonna touch those valves probably a little bit more than Wildwood Water would touch their water valves. Because if not, they would
These
turn
are
them.
gonna use a lot of, so I'm wondering if they're gonna get stuck.
What's that?
I wonder if they'll get stuck.
They shouldn't.
And these other ones, they're no worse, but nobody ever opens those valves, so, or closes them, or whatever.
Yeah, these valves
These are
again,
gonna get operated a lot, and
which is good. The more the valve is operated, the better it is.
Joanne Dunhauer, I have a couple questions. Can you flip back to the Wisteria Road picture? I'm just curious as to when that picture was taken.
Sandy,
Sandy.
had to be Sandy.
That was
No,
this
it's
year,
recently.
February
This is-
12th of 2024.
This one?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was February of this year.
That's
Um,
Eastern.
When you mentioned that the road is gonna be, because that, we live on the corner of Park and Wisteria.
Okay.
And the only time when you've ever had it come over the bulkhead in the back is during Sandy. When you talk about raising the street end 6 to 15 inches, what does that do to the sidewalk and the property on either side of the road?
So that's a great question. So it varies on a case-by-case basis on each street end, so I don't want to steal the mayor's thunder, but the segue as to the next steps of this is we've identified each street end, what impact it has on a property owner. What I can tell you is there will not be a scenario where your property's back pitched. All that sidewalk and curb in the right-of-way is going to be replaced and elevated. If there's an instance where the borough has to go onto private property to say to transition a driveway or find another joint to make it come out smoothly, the borough will be in contact with each one on an individual basis to review that, get an access agreement, et cetera. So there'll be no surprises.
But you just mentioned that potentially if you're raising the street, now you have to raise the sidewalk as well.
Correct.
So that would impact my property because my property meets the sidewalk at some point.
Okay, so if that's the case, then in your case, we'd have to look at our plans. If we might be able to make that transition in the right-of-way, or we might have to come onto your property to redo your concrete driveway, assuming it's concrete. The borough would be in contact to go over that with you.
Nancy, I just, where are you starting? Which street are you starting or?
We, that's not specified. When those bid specs go out, we haven't been given like a preference.
Okay.
I would think that this contractor, because there's a lead time on the valves, would not start in the area where it's just getting valves. I would suspect that they would start in the southern end of the project to start replacing bulkheads. We haven't specified to a contractor where they start first, but I would assume they're going to be working in the southern end first.
So I'm on the corner of Crocus and Park as well, and you have redone the bulkheads there. It's, bulkhead probably sits at street level, you have the cement block ahead of it. As I become compliant and redo my bulkhead, hypothetically, to the required 3 feet above, how am I gonna tie my bulkhead in the cement slab? There's never really a way to seal that. And second piece, do I have the ability to tie a new bulkhead into the existing city bulkhead? Because I'm gonna need to do that, if not, you're gonna get seepage.
So those are good questions. So when you hire an engineer, he's gonna take a look at that and he'll integrate that into his plans. You'll need to get a permit for it, which would be reviewed by our office.
Okay?
And we would work with your engineer to make that coordination.
I think you're talking to Rick Allen. Rick, do you know Rick?
I do,
Okay, I think he's the engineer that's speaking to you about it.
okay.
Okay. I'll make sure that he addresses that as well.
With the thought that you want private property owners to raise their bulkhead as well, has anyone looked at the impact on the individual's property who, you know, if their property is now at bulkhead level, what that does to their yard, if you're now raising the bulkhead, that you're potentially eliminating part of someone's yard, essentially.
Or deck.
Correct.
It essentially takes away your view, which you bought bayfront property, to look directly out into the water. And potentially it could go up 36 inches, not 8 feet, not 5, but 36 inches. I would say would be a good guess. That would certainly impact a resident's view, if you were to sit in your yard. As we sit today, we look clearly at the water.
So let's do a scenario where you're gonna do substantial improvement, which I think you might be involved in. As part of substantial improvement, you have to make the whole home compliant, which means you're probably raising the house, and you're gonna have to raise the bulkhead. That's an excellent opportunity for you to fill your backyard.
Okay, but if you had no intentions of doing improvements, and we're raising your house,
Well, if you're raising your house, that's gonna trigger substantial improvement, you're gonna be required to comply with the new height.
understood. But if you're
But-
not
and
gonna
then-
raise your house,
And then when you raise that house, now you have modifications on the ground you have to make. I would say to you, that's a great opportunity to fill. If, in a perfect world, we would have those bulkheads up at 8, we would have all the backyards and lots filled, and we would have all the streets raised. If you could snap your fingers and do it all over again.
So you bring up another great point. As I raise the bulkhead to be compliant, it's about 29 to 30 inches, because I had the elevation survey done. That extends my house by an extra 2.5 feet. There is a limitation of 43 feet, I believe, the maximum residential house. And this will push it above that because of the new starting point.
Well, so the definition of building height is measured from your finished floor elevation. So let's just say hypothetically, there's a maximum building height of 40 feet. That wouldn't start until your finished floor is at the proper elevation. So you're not being penalized.
That's not the way it's explained to my guy, because we're chatting about that chart. So we can take it.
Okay.
There's a new home with Gary Agnes, there's a new home built at Heather and Lake Road.
Yeah.
You know, big one. If anybody wants to see what the bulkhead's gonna look like, just walk down Heather to the water, take a look over the fence, because they got a little thing there. They've got an area that's probably that high above the ground.
Mhm.
And that bulkhead meets whatever is going to happen for the future, the criteria that you set for it. So if anybody wants to know what it's gonna look like, just walk right there and take a look at it. You know, you'll see the difference, because the ground wasn't brought up.
Was that, so the house was brought up, right?
Well, there's new house,
It's a brand new.
Oh, it's a new house,
brand
okay.
new home.
So if that was,
They spent $3 million making this place, on that corner
so
property.
that property owner could elect to fill the backyard or leave that wall there.
Correct.
Right.
If you don't have major improvements planned and you can't really fill in your backyard, and you raise that bulkhead, and you have a boat lift, on the other side, do you propose that we have to install steps now to get to?
So you're saying under a theoretical situation where you're raising your bulkhead, so you would hire your engineer to deal with how you would make that transition?
All your gangplanks have to be adjusted, because they come off your bulkhead. There's a lot of trickle effect on this.
Oh, absolutely, 100%.
Anybody else? Any other questions?
Yeah, Kevin Malloy is my name, and we are on the bay at Palm Road. And we, like, I think just about everyone else along the bay that I'm aware of, who have existing properties, not recent construction, have a pier that goes out to their floating docks, whatever. Those piers are all, of course, built on the height of the bulkhead. But piers can't be raised. Piers can only be destroyed and rebuilt. because they're built on pilings that have been lopped at a certain height that were shot at the level of the bulkhead. So if one raises one's bulkhead, the only thing you can do is start all over again with a brand new pier. All new pilings, all new framing, decking, etc. And that doesn't even address what you have to do on the house side of the bulkhead.
So you could install steps, you can talk to an engineer and a contractor about trying to extend those piling up.
You can't,
Depends on how high you have to go.
well, 30 inches is
So you could do steps or replace the pier.
exactly. And the ground-based decking on the land side of the bulkhead.
Potentially, yes, yep.
$500,000. I know, we paid for it already.
Okay, any more questions? Anybody on the conference line have any questions on the presentation? Okay, so just wrapping this up, just a couple quick comments. So, this packet that the presentation you just saw, don't be surprised if you get the same presentation in the mail. We just wanted to make sure that all of our,
I'm gonna put it on the website tomorrow.
okay, it's also, they're gonna get a letter, the general letter. The general letter is gonna go out to everyone advising of the project, to all the property owners on Park and Lake, just so they're aware. The individuals that have, what I'll call right-of-way issues, they'll be noticed directly as well by certified mail. And those are identifying the right-of-ways that have improvements that weren't put in by the borough. For example, pavers and travertine slate and things that weren't supposed to be there. But when we go to do the project, it's gonna get put back in with concrete. So those details and any easement or right-of-way issues that may have to be addressed between the borough and the property owner, that'll be addressed between our legal counsel and the engineering and the borough to make sure that everybody has an understanding as to what's going back. Heard a lot of discussion on the bulkhead, so I just want to make sure that everyone keeps this in mind, is that the borough's bulkheads, I'm talking the southern end of the Park Boulevard from Astor South. Those bulkheads there's three of them, right? There was the original one that was put in, there was another one put in behind it, and then there's another one put in behind it. That infrastructure is old, it needs to be replaced. So this is not something that the borough of Wildwood Crest said, hey, let's just raise the bulkheads 8 feet. If we touch the bulkhead, we have to get it up to the 8 feet. That's a federal mandate. That's what the feds want. That's not what Wildwood Crest wants, that's what the feds want. And as we're dealing with flood insurance and ratings and so forth, and that's the stuff that we have to look at, because they want to see it's not just Wildwood Crest, it's Stone Harbor, it's Avalon, it's all coastal environments that have bayfronts. So I want to make sure that we keep our eye on the ball. And lastly, I learned one thing, and this is a trivia question. So what is another name for water seeks its own level? Who was paying attention to the presentation? All right, that's good. Congratulations. All right, so if you have any more questions, we're gonna, again, this is, it's still some wheels in motion, some balls in the air. And we wanted to have this public meeting. We've had other public meetings in the past. And from those other public meetings, it was very clearly made to us that, hey, the borough, my bulkhead personally is not a problem. We'd like to see the borough address its valves and the bulkheads first before you start mandating what happens on the private property. So we did pass the ordinance, but there's no mandate in the ordinance. So I think it's safe to say you've got some time before that even comes down the road. This is only 2024. I think we have, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, no later than 2050 to put something like that in. So I just want everybody to be.
I won't be at the meeting.
I won't be here either. So.
There is a mandate if you make substantial improvements.
Right.
Yeah, well, that part of it is, yes. I'm talking about if you don't make it's substantial improvements, you're correct. Okay. All right, any other last minute questions? All right, Mr. de Blasio, Mr. Abrams, thank you. And if anybody wants to leave the meeting after this presentation, you're more than welcome. If you have further questions, please feel free to give engineering a call, and we'll get it addressed. We'll take a 3-minute recess, and we'll clear the room, and anybody wants to go.